Hey y'all, it's Kim. This is gonna be video number 2 of the Richard Kahn deposition with the GOP Oversight Committee. Sorry, somebody was trying to call me as soon as I pulled that up. But either way, um, so he was the accountant for Epstein. He so far has said he doesn't know anything, but you know how it is. He may have known something, or he was sending payments off, or something because he was doing all the accounting for him. So there must have been money changing hands somewhere along the way. And I think he mentioned something about some gifts that were sent off to different people, some of the victims, that kind of stuff. But anyway, let's let him talk. I'm going to probably set it for like an hour and then we'll kind of go from there. Alrighty? Here you go. Just give it a moment. This thing always takes a minute. Hello.
We're on the record. Mr. Kahn, good morning.
Good morning.
I understand from your testimony in the previous round that you first became aware of Jeffrey Epstein's arrest in Florida through a conversation you had with him in 2008. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you recall the date of Mr. Epstein's arrest?
His arrest, I do not know the date. I know when he was incarcerated. I believe it was June 30th, 2000.
I'm going to ask the court reporter to mark as Exhibit A an email. It's a thread initiated by you to Mr. Epstein. I'll give you a moment to review it. Could I ask you to read the first email into the record?
When you say the first email, from the bottom?
At the bottom, it's the one dated July 28th, 2006.
Bottom up?
Yes.
It says, I know it has been a challenging week. I support you 100%. If there's anything I can do for you, please let me know.
And the email was sent by you to Mr. Epstein, correct?
Yes.
And what were you referring to there when you talked about a challenging week?
I don't recall.
So I'll represent to you that Mr. Epstein was arrested on July 23rd, 2006. Okay. Is there anything you could have been referring to in that email other than his arrest?
I don't recall this email, so it's hard for me to make comments on what I knew.
It appears from this communication that you've actually learned of Mr. Epstein's arrest in July of 2006 rather than 2008 as you testified in the previous round.
That's not correct. I testified to what I recall to a conversation I had in 2008. This email does not say, I know that you were arrested and it's been a challenging week. It says, I know it's been a challenging week and I support you. It does not say in this email, I know you were arrested. So I'm not going to testify to that.
Is there any other challenge you could have been referring to in this email apart from his arrest?
As I said when I testified a few minutes ago, I don't recall this email, so I don't know what I was referring to.
I would like to return to the subject of the point in time when you started working for Mr. Epstein. Did you have a title?
I think Epstein referred to me and others from HBRK, actually it was at the time New York Strategy Group, as accountants and bookkeepers.
You were asked during the previous round about Mr. Epstein's net worth, and I wanted to return to that topic as well. If I understood correctly, you said you didn't have complete visibility into that question at the onset of your employment, but I understood from your testimony in the last round that there came a point in time when you did. Is that fair?
So I believe the question earlier was Epstein was a wealthy man. And I testified that I understood he was a wealthy man because he had many homes and he had planes and other assets. And I said at the time, I was not handling his individual stocks and bonds or asset summaries. So I didn't know what his net worth was. I just knew he was a wealthy man. When Harry Beller left working for Epstein, excuse me, in I believe May of 2014, at that point in time, I began making asset summaries for Epstein.
Okay, so let's start at that point in time. What was Mr. Epstein's approximate net worth?
One additional clarification, the asset summaries that I was preparing only included Epstein's liquid assets, his investments in stocks, bonds. It might have been loans receivable. It might have been maybe an investment in a private company that was valued on a frequent basis, but it never included his homes. He never wanted to see his homes on there. So I can't accurately say it was a net worth statement. It was, a good portion of his assets, but not a total financial picture.
Okay, so we can break those apart. Liquid assets, what was the value as you understood?
Again, I don't recall what at any given point in time his liquid assets were worth. I do know he had hundreds of millions of dollars in stocks and bonds and investments. And I do know, as serving as co-executor, that when we filed his Form 706 estate tax return, it had somewhere between 500 and 600 million in assets.
And so just to clarify, I understood your testimony in the previous round with respect to your appointment as co-executor. You were not surprised at that appointment because you did have visibility into the value of his assets. Is that correct?
I thought Epstein would want me to serve as his co-executor, and I chose to serve as co-executor because I thought I knew his assets best.
However, it appears at the moment that you did not have complete command of his assets, if I'm understanding your answers correctly.
I don't think he said that at all. I think he said he doesn't recall in 2014 what the assets are worth. He told you what they were worth at the time of the estate becoming formed. So I'm not sure your question.
So I'm sorry, I just want to make sure we're clear on what your understanding was at these various shifting points in time. You did have complete visibility into the totality of Mr. Epstein's assets at the time his estate was formed, but not prior to that. And I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Please, not what I testified.
Please clarify.
What I testified was, you had asked me what was his net worth, what was he worth, what was the value of his stocks and bonds. And I said, I don't recall any specific value from 2014 to 2019. I knew it was in the hundreds of millions of dollars. I then testified, I know at his date of death, when the estate tax return was filed, it was somewhere between, I think, 550 and $600 million. So I knew the totality of his assets, but I did not know, number one, his net worth at any given point in time, because we never included the homes, nor do I recall to a particular period. These reports were produced monthly, nor do I recall from 2014 to 19 what any monthly valuation would be.
Was part of your job duties the preparation of Mr. Epstein's tax returns?
I never prepared any tax returns for Epstein. He used outside accountants.
During the period of time that Mr. Epstein employed you, what were the sources of his wealth?
Epstein earned fees from his clients for financial, tax, and estate planning. Epstein made investments, so he had interest, dividends, made real estate investments, so he had passive income. That's what I understand the sources of his income to be.
If we could talk about the clients for a few minutes. How many clients did Mr. Epstein have? Again, this is during the period of your employment.
So I know clients to be individuals that paid income to Epstein's entities. And I believe during my period of time, somewhere between 5 and 10 clients Epstein had. However, there were many times that Epstein spent time talking to someone, trying to cultivate business, but that never occurred. So he might spend a year or two with what he would think would be a prospective client, and that person, maybe he gave them advice that was useful or not, but that client never paid fees. So I don't know if you would consider that to be a client. But, in getting to the number 10, I think probably there were about 5 that he spoke to that never paid fees, and I'm aware of approximately 5 clients that paid fees over the years.
And I appreciate that distinction. If we could focus on the clients who did pay fees, who were they?
What do I have to say?
So there are certain confidentiality agreements that Mr. Kahn has signed on to. So we have, just that issue with respect to that. I mean, I think these names are probably well known, but nonetheless, Mr. Kahn is bound by confidentiality agreements.
And do those confidentiality agreements set forth a complete bar to disclosure? Are there not exceptions for responses to questions duly posed by a congressional committee?
I don't recall exactly the language, but I don't believe there's any exception for a congressional committee. I think it's by law. I'm not sure if this qualifies by law. If you would, I think you could ask if, do you mind if we take a 2-minute break? I'll just talk to Mr. Kahn about this.
Sure, I'll just note for the record that from the minority's perspective, I won't speak for our majority colleagues. Your client is under an obligation pursuant to subpoena to respond to all of our questions today. So
we'd love to do it.
Leave it there, and yes, we can go off the record.
Yeah, we got to get our story straight before they divulge something they're not supposed to.
And John, you can ask that question again.
Again, my question, Mr. Kahn, you referred to 5 clients of Jeffrey Epstein who paid fees to him during the period of your employment. And so I would ask you to identify those 5 clients.
The first client that paid fees that I'm aware of is Les Wexner. The next client that paid fees was either Glenn Dubin individually or his entity, Highbridge Capital. The next client was an individual named Steven Sinofsky. I believe Rothschild paid fees.
Rothschild, is that an individual or an entity?
I don't recall. I don't recall how the income was received, but I believe it was from, maybe Ariana Rothschild or one of her affiliated entities. And Leon Black, I believe, was the 5th.
Thank you.
And they're all
break those down. I'd just like to ask you about the services that Mr. Epstein provided to each of those 5, starting with Les Wexner.
I am not aware of the services that Epstein provided to Les Wexner because I was not involved in working with Epstein or anyone from New York Strategy Group on that account. I had no interface with Les Wexner and Epstein's fee income.
And again, this is cabin to the period of your employment. How much did Mr. Wexner pay Jeffrey Epstein?
I don't know.
Then Glenn Dubin, same questions.
Glenn Dubin, I remember seeing income come in for the sale of Highbridge. I don't recall a specific amount. I think it was somewhere between $15 and $25 million, but I don't recall the specific number. And the income may have come in before I began working there. But I do recall at one point seeing an invoice and a fee.
And that was in connection with the sale of Highbridge Capital?
That is my understanding.
And the services that Mr. Epstein provided to Mr. Dubin in connection with that sale were what?
My understanding, again, I was not involved in that work, but my understanding was that he advised on the sale of Highbridge Capital to JP Morgan.
And then Leon Black.
Leon Black, I was involved in the work on that account, and Epstein provided tax, estate planning, and financial consulting work to Leon Black. And that is what he received the income for.
And how much did Mr. Black pay him?
I don't recall the exact amount. I believe it was somewhere in the range of $150 million.
Yeah.
And with respect to the tax and estate planning consulting work, what specific issues was Jeffrey Epstein advising him about?
There were many things that Epstein was working on for Leon Black. I think the first thing that Epstein did, at least that I was aware of, so I'm only speaking from what I'm aware of, or what I was involved in. I don't know about Mr. Black and Epstein's conversations that they had regarding the work, so I can't speak to what Epstein provided consulting on, but I know that I believe when Epstein first started working with Black, Leon Black had a family office that was very understaffed. So one of the first things that Epstein helped Black with was staff up a proper-sized family office. So we were involved in the hiring of individuals to support Black's assets and his needs. We were involved in reviewing his trusts, his holdings, how he held art, how he held investments. I know Epstein did a lot of talk with Leon Black regarding his TRA, which I believe is a tax receivable asset. We reviewed the structure of how Leon Black held his planes. His planes were managed by an outside entity. So we reviewed the expenses for his planes and I believe his boat. We dealt with one of the hires that Leon Black made was he hired an estate attorney and an art consultant. So the majority of our meetings revolved around estate planning, whereby they would produce a book that would include all of Mr. Black's assets, and they would run through different scenarios based on where Apollo stock was and how that would impact his estate.
Don't go into what the attorney says.
Okay.
Don't tell what Black's attorney says.
So we did estate planning.
It appears that you are rather closely familiar with the scope of the work that Mr. Epstein did for Leon Black, but not for Les Wexner. Why is that?
Because I began working for Epstein in October of 2005, and I was never involved on that account. Harry Bella was working there at the time. So Harry Bella was handling all of the trusts. He was handling all the investments. It just, I guess it was well staffed, and I wasn't needed. And I believe shortly thereafter, that relationship between Epstein and Mr. Wexner ended.
What was your understanding as to why that relationship ended?
I don't know why it ended, but I do know it ended around the time of his incarceration.
Of Mr. Epstein's incarceration in 2008.
Correct.
And then just to round out this, Mr. Kahn, Steven Sinofsky, do I have that right?
That was one of the names I mentioned that Epstein received fees from.
Who is Mr. Sinofsky?
I don't know. Let me rephrase that. At the time, I didn't know who he was. I've seen subsequent press reports in the last 6 months to a year. I understand that Mr. Sinofsky used to work at Microsoft. However, I have no knowledge of what work Epstein did for Mr. Sinofsky to receive those fees.
And then lastly, Ariana Rothschild.
My understanding for that was that Epstein was doing estate planning on their behalf, and I did attend a few meetings with Miss Rothschild's team, along with some Epstein's staff.
Do you know how much money Mr. Sinofsky paid Jeffrey Epstein?
I believe it was $5 million.
And what about Ms. Rothschild?
I think it was 20 or $25 million.
Just a few follow-up questions related to Mr. Epstein's incarceration in Florida. Did you or anyone else ever make any payments in connection with Epstein's incarceration or work release? I can be more specific. Payments with payments with the goal of securing for Mr. Epstein better treatment, either in prison or on his work release.
I'm not aware of any payments that relate to what you just mentioned.
And to your knowledge, did you or anyone else ever make any payment on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein to any law enforcement officer?
Not that I'm aware of, although I do believe when Epstein had office hours in Florida, he was required to have, I don't know what the right term is, a guard or someone that was present either in his office or outside his office. I believe that might have been, I don't know if that answers your question or relates to your question, but that might have been something that he was responsible to pay for.
Were you involved in making that payment?
I don't recall.
Was any payment ever made by you or anyone else on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein to Alex Acosta?
Not that I'm aware of.
And did you ever become aware of Jeffrey Epstein paying the fees for attorneys for victims in the Florida case?
It was reported that he did.
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Sure. Did you ever become aware of Jeffrey Epstein paying for the attorneys who represented victims in the Florida case?
I don't recall. I wasn't that familiar with that at the time.
I'd like to shift gears and talk a little bit more about 301 East 66th Street, the building where I understand you had an office for a period of time. We've talked about the office arrangement. I'd like to ask you whether there were women connected to Jeffrey Epstein who were also living at 301 East 66th.
Women, or only women, or the men too?
Start with the women.
At the time, Epstein had, I believe, 10 to 12 apartments at 301 East 66th Street. So let's just say for this example, there were 10 apartments. The offices 10B and 10F were two out of the 10 apartments. I believe there was a period of time, and I'm not speaking to a specific year. I'm going to just speak generally speaking because I don't recall the dates where people occupied apartments, but I know of the apartments that Epstein had. Some of his assistants did have apartments. I believe Sarah Kellen had an apartment. I believe Nadia Marcinkova had an apartment. I believe at one point in time, Svetlana had an apartment. I believe at one point in time, an employee of Eva Dubin's, maybe a housekeeper, had an apartment. I believe two of the pilots had apartments. I believe that Lynn, his housekeeper from 90 71st Street, had an apartment. And I think there was always a couple of guest apartments that he kept open for guests or friends that would come in town that he would be able to use those apartments for.
Okay, back up for a second. You said that Mr. Epstein had 10 to 12 apartments in the building. Did he own those units?
That's a good question. I don't believe he owns those apartments, and I was not familiar with the arrangements. What I understood was that on a few of the apartments, Epstein paid rent. So let's just say, for example, $2,000 a month. And on the remainder of the apartments, Epstein was billed annually, and he would pay for the operating expenses of those apartments. So, for example, the equivalent as if it was a condo, he would pay the common charges and the real estate taxes. And I believe utilities may have been included in that payment as well. So we were billed annually for the majority of the apartments.
So it's fair to say that he covered the cost of housing for the people who occupied those units.
Yes, with a few exceptions. There were a few individuals over time that did pay rent.
Did any of the women you just identified pay rent?
I believe over a period of time, there were some women that paid rent.
Who?
I believe Jen Kaling and Karina Shuliak paid rent at one point in time. Paid rent. I think at one point in time, John Luke had an apartment, he paid rent. I think there are others. Maybe there was one other apartment, but I don't recall who that was.
As to the individuals for whom Mr. Epstein did pay rent, was it your job to make those rent payments on his behalf?
The individuals that paid rent directly to the management company. The rent didn't come to Epstein. But when Epstein was billed, as I mentioned earlier, at the end of the year, I believe Epstein's New York entity, NES LLC, paid the costs of the apartments at 301 East 66th Street.
Was that you or Bella who did that?
Bella, the bill would come to me by OSA Properties. I would review the bill, Epstein would approve it, and Bella Klein would make the payment.
I am going to ask the court reporter to mark as Exhibit B an email thread between yourself and Leslie Groff dated November 7th, 2014.
What was that? He's blowing out his cheeks like,
Mr. Kahn, I'm going to ask you about some of the individuals referenced in this email. Before I do that, I just want to make a request for the record to the majority to ensure that to the extent any of my questions today elicit the identity of any actual or potential Epstein survivors, that those names and any information from which they could be identified are fully redacted prior to any public release of the transcript. Now, as to this email, Mr. Kahn, starting at the bottom, you are emailing Ms. Roth for a breakdown of, well, why don't you read that sentence into the record?
Okay, on November 7th,
yes,
2014, I wrote to Leslie Groff, can you please send me latest breakdown of 8 apartments I wrote alts, but it means apartments for 301. Thanks.
And why were you asking Ms. Groff for that?
The reason that I was inquiring about the status of the apartments was that the individuals that stayed at Epstein's apartments were receiving a benefit from Epstein because he was paying the expenses. So it was my job to assemble the information for Epstein's gift tax returns. And I needed to make sure that I knew who was living in the apartment and for what period of time, so that that could be properly reported on Epstein's gift tax returns.
If we could focus on the second email, and I'll start from the top of the list. There's a reference to 2G, and I take that to be the apartment unit. Is that correct?
2G, yes.
Okay. Do you know, looking at this email, who the individual whose name is redacted here is?
No, I was going to say, I'm assuming everyone she is redacted. Right, I can't tell you, I don't know who was ever in any apartment other than what I said earlier, we were in 10B and 10F, but.
Well, Ms. Groff sent you a list identifying the occupants of these units, right?
Right, but I guess what I'm trying to say, and forgive me for not being clear, I don't recall the specifics of this email at the time. I know why I asked for the apartments, but I don't remember from 2014 who was in any apartment now, looking at it today. And unfortunately, the names that you're asking me for were redacted.
So I'll just go down the list. 3M also redacted.
Yes.
Do you know who that individual is?
No.
Do you know whether the individuals referenced with respect to 2G and 3M were female?
I don't know who the names are of 2G and 3M as they're redacted, so I can't answer that question.
5P is Lynn and JoJo?
Yes.
Who were they?
Lynn and JoJo were Epstein's housekeeper and driver for 90 71st Street.
And 7J is Jean-Luc?
Yes.
And who is that individual?
I believe Jean-Luc was a friend of Epstein's.
Okay, and I will return to him at a later point today. 8A, guest apartment. 8C, JE Brother Kids. Who's that referring to?
I think when I was pondering before, I thought maybe there was another apartment that paid. I believe that Epstein was paying for his brother's apartment. Joyce might be a reference to Mark Epstein's first wife. And Epstein was providing apartments for his kids, possibly. That's what I assume from this.
Moving further down the list, 8H, name redacted. Do you know who that individual is?
No.
Do you know whether that person was female?
No.
10F, also redacted. Do you know who that individual is?
No.
Do you know if that person was female?
No.
And 10N, again, name redacted. Do you know who that individual is?
I do not.
Was that individual female?
I do not know.
11E, once again, redacted.
I do not know who that individual was.
Okay. And 11J, also redacted.
In the parentheses, redacted, I do not know who, I do not know what the redaction relates to.
So going back to the roster of individuals who connected to Mr. Epstein, who had units in the building, how many of those were female? And I'm going to exclude Lynn and JoJo from that list.
Are you including the kids?
Not including the kids.
Did you want them to speculate based on their redactions?
No.
So if I understand your question, you're asking me this list of apartments from November 4th.
I'm asking, independent of this email, what women do you recall having been in the building, women who were connected to Jeffrey Epstein?
What women do I recall living in the building at any point in time?
At any point in time.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Sarah Kelly, Nadia Marcinkova, Svetlana, I don't recall her last name, it's with a P. I believe Sue Hamlin had an apartment at one point in time. There may be a few more names, but I don't recall. That's what comes to mind.
And of that list, what was the age range?
But I can tell you, I know that none of those women were minors.
Were any of them, to your understanding, above the age of 30?
As I said before, I do not know their age range, but I do know that none of those women were minors.
How do you know that?
Because, as I said and testified earlier, I was required to obtain their date of birth for either employment records or for gift tax returns.
And what was your understanding as to the nature of their relationship to Jeffrey Epstein?
Some of the women that were mentioned were assistants that worked for Epstein.
Were these women, from your perspective, women who would generally be perceived as attractive?
I can't make that judgment. You're asking me if I thought these women were attractive?
Sure.
It's
not a fair question.
Yeah, he can't answer that question. I mean, everyone has their own view of it, and if you're getting at something, if you want to say, did you think they were being abused? Just ask them that question.
No, I'm interested in his perception of their attractiveness.
I never looked and viewed at Epstein's assistants and made judgment on their looks.
Sitting here now and knowing these women, would you classify any of them as unattractive?
Yes.
Which ones?
I'm not answering that question. I'm not answering that question.
And to your understanding, did Mr. Epstein view these women as attractive?
I don't know how Epstein viewed any woman.
Were any of those women foreign?
I believe Nadia Marcinkova was foreign. Svetlana, I believe, was foreign, and was foreign.
What were their nationalities?
Eastern European. I don't recall the countries.
Russian?
Potentially, I don't recall the countries.
And what was your understanding as to how they came to know Jeffrey Epstein?
I didn't know how these women came to meet Mr. Epstein.
Did you ever ask him about that?
Did I ask Epstein how he met his assistants?
These women, yes.
The women that we're speaking about now?
Yes.
No.
Did you ever talk to anyone else about that?
No.
Did you ever understand that Jeffrey Epstein was engaging in sexual activity with any of those women?
Can you repeat your question, please?
Did you ever understand that Jeffrey Epstein was engaging in sexual activity with any of those women?
I was not aware of Epstein's personal and sexual relationships.
Did you think it was possible?
It's not something that I'm talking about.
Did you think it was possible that he was sexually abusing any of them?
I never thought it was possible that Epstein was sexually abusing them, because if I thought that, I would have never continued to work for Epstein.
Did you believe that the relationship between these women and Jeffrey Epstein was platonic?
I knew that these women worked for Epstein as assistants. I made no judgment if these women were girlfriends. What I knew is that none of these women were minors, and I also knew that none of these women ever came to me and said that they were in danger or that they were being sexually abused or trafficked by Epstein.
So we talked about women at 301 East 66th. You've also mentioned being in Epstein's home, and specifically, if I understand correctly, his mansion on East 71st Street. Is that correct?
I visited Epstein's home at 90 71st Street approximately every 3 weeks for my meetings with Epstein.
And when you were present for those meetings, you observed women present in his residence. Is that also correct?
On my visits to Epstein's home, I saw women. The first woman I would see is usually when I would come into the building would be Leslie Groff, who had an office right off the stairway. I often would see Epstein's housekeeper, Lynn, sometimes another housekeeper by the name of Tess, and on occasion, either waiting for a meeting in Leslie's office for Epstein, I would see some of Epstein's assistants.
And when you say some of Epstein's assistants, are you referring to the women who resided at 301 East 66th that we were just discussing, or are these different women?
I'm referring to assistants of Epstein. I don't know where all of Epstein's assistants resided.
So I just want to be clear, because again, we're talking about the roster of women that you encountered. The ones that we're talking about you seeing in his residence are distinct from the list living at 301 East 66 that we talked about.
What I'm saying is, you asked me the question, is every woman you saw at 90 71st Street who was an assistant of Epstein's, did they all live at 301 East 66th Street? And what I'm saying to you is I named 3 or 4 assistants of Epstein, and over my 14 years of working for Epstein, he had more than 3 or 4 assistants. So I don't know where some of these other women lived. And you're trying to reference to me, where did some of these other women live? I don't know. Maybe they lived at one point in time at 301. Maybe they lived somewhere else, but I can't answer that question.
Irrespective of their residence, the women that you observed in Epstein's mansion, what was the age range of those women?
I don't know the age range of the women that worked for Epstein as assistants, but I do know that none of them were minors.
Did any of them, to your observation, appear to be above the age of 30?
There probably were some, but I don't, as I keep testifying, I don't know the exact age of these women, but I believe that there were some assistants that were in their 30s, yes.
And how many of those women were also foreign?
I don't know.
Did you ever travel on Mr. Epstein's plane?
Yes, on 2 occasions I traveled on Epstein's plane. This was at a time when I was visiting his office in St. Thomas, the U.S. Virgin Islands. I purchased a round-trip ticket to go meet with his office employees in St. Thomas, and usually my trips to see his islands were revolving around a construction project. So as I alluded to before, just as an example, if he was running a batch plant and there was a big project going on, I may go down and look at the projects because I was told many times that I was very tough in approving bills. So many times Epstein wanted me to see a project so I could better understand what was going on and pay those invoices quicker. So I typically went to visit his local office in St. Thomas, and on occasion would take a trip to his islands during that visit to see a project or deal with staffing or employment issues. But on 2 of the visits whereby I purchased a round-trip ticket, Epstein was also in residence and asked if I would like a ride back to New York, whereby I said yes. And those were the 2 occasions I traveled on Epstein's plane.
And on those 2 trips, who else was on the plane with you?
On the first plane ride, and I don't recall the dates, it was Darren Endyke, myself, Epstein, and I believe Sarah Kelland, plus the 2 pilots.
And that's both trips?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. The second trip, it was myself, Epstein, an assistant, and the 2 pilots.
And who was the assistant?
I don't recall the assistant, but what I do recall specifically about that flight is that the pilots asked me if I wanted to sit in the cockpit and watch the whole plane process, which I said yes, and regretted that because it was pretty scary with the speed and watching it through the front window.
You have some questions for me?
Yes.
Thank you for your cooperation. I'm Dr. Suhas Silverman in Virginia. Some of this may be a little redundant, but I appreciate you bearing with me. Did Jeffrey Epstein or anyone associated with him ever ask you to assist with anything illegal, or you may have construed to potentially be illegal at the time working for him?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Were you ever asked to do anything illegal yourself?
Not that I'm aware of.
Were you ever asked, did you ever ask or inquire about the legality of any of these transactions or any of his actions?
Could you be more specific with your question, please?
In your capacity while working for him, did you ever inquire with Jeffrey Epstein or any associates, including Darren Dyke, about the legality of anything going on with Jeffrey Epstein?
Are you asking if I ever saw a transaction that was alarming that I asked him a question?
Yes.
Not that I'm aware of.
Did you ever see any transactions that you found alarming or found suspicious in any way?
I never saw a transaction in Epstein's books and records that said payment for sex, or I don't recall ever seeing any payments that said, for massages. So there was never anything in his ledger that alluded to that, if that's what you're asking.
And just to follow up to that, I'm not referring just to sex trafficking, but anything illegal, not just sex trafficking.
Not that I'm aware of.
And did you ever provide any financial advice or assistance to any women associated with Jeffrey Epstein, such as tax advice or just any informal financial advice?
4 or 5 of Epstein's assistants had asked if I would do a favor and prepare their tax returns.
Do you remember who they were?
I believe it was Karina Shuliak. Maybe her name's Lalasa, I'm not sure. There might have been 2 others, but those are the names that I recall.
So you mentioned in 2008, you heard about the arrest, but by 2019, is that when you started to learn about the extent of his crimes?
When the Miami Herald article came out, it was alarming because there was a lot more depth to what took place in 2008. And at the time, this was the time when we had just gotten dropped by Deutsche Bank.
So after he was dropped by banks, did you help him try to find new firms that would transfer him?
When Epstein was dropped by Deutsche Bank, I tried to help Epstein open up cash and brokerage accounts.
Did you ever help him withdraw cash amounts that wouldn't trigger federal reporting, specifically because of that amount wouldn't trigger federal reporting?
I never had signatory on any of Epstein's accounts, with the exception of HBRK, which was my company. It was a company, a design company that I had signatory authority for the sole purpose of processing payroll. I never signed any cash withdrawals from that. And at one point in time, one of his trusts I had signatory authority, but all of his other accounts, I never had signatory authority until the last 6 months when Epstein was alive.
Did you ever withdraw cash for Jeffrey Epstein to pay for services or paycheck?
Not that I recall.
Did you ever? How were Jeffrey Epstein's employees generally paid? Were they paid the wire transfer or cash? Do you have any knowledge of that?
Epstein had assistants that were on payroll, and it was with the employees. My assumption was those are the employees that were working full time. But Epstein may have had other assistants that were not full time that he may have paid via cash or wire transfer, but I'm not aware of that because I didn't travel with these individuals.
Were you ever any financial transactions involved public figures, such as politicians, lawyers, or at the state?
Could you please repeat that?
Were you involved in any, or were you aware of or involved in any financial transactions involving Jeffrey Epstein or any public figures, political leaders, or heads of state?
Public figures, well, financial training,
such as wire transfers, such as business dealings.
Would Leon Black be considered a public figure?
I would think anyone in like a government or anyone who's a public figure.
Politician.
An American politician?
Or politician around the world.
The only thing that comes to mind is that I believe Epstein invested in an entity, or I don't even know if it was his partner or what the original origins of, but with Ehud Barak.
And then were you aware of any financial transactions while you were employed there involving Jeffrey Epstein and the Trump family? Yeah, before you've been employed or after?
Never aware of any transactions between Epstein and the Trump family.
Thank you, Mr. Kahn. I'm James Walkinshaw from Virginia, and I'm going to start by introducing Exhibit C, which is an email chain between Jeffrey Epstein and a redacted individual from September 13th, 2017, with the subject line Visa.
Thank you.
Switzerland. We have a copy of it there. As I said, it's an email between Epstein and a person whose identity is redacted. The redacted sender emails Epstein and asking what she should put down.
Excuse me 1 second. Could you mind if I read it for a second?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so as you saw in this email, the redacted sender emails Epstein asking what she should put down for university application to explain, quote, who is the sponsor to me and on what grounds she provides me with financial support. Epstein then explains that the redacted person will have a sponsor paying for the full tuition. And she replies, quote, a full scholarship from Richard Kahn. I'm sorry, sir, but I don't see the connection. And then as you saw on page 3, Epstein replies, Richard has decided to pay for your school. That's all you need to know. He gives out scholarships. Smiley face. Mr. Kahn, have you seen this email before today? You've all seen this email?
No, I've never seen this email.
Okay, so you're not familiar with this?
I believe I'm familiar with the transaction,
Okay.
but I'm not familiar with the email.
Okay. And you know who the sender is? Who's Epstein corresponding with?
It might have been a woman by the name of.
Do you remember surname?
I believe it is with. I don't recall her last name.
Okay. What was your relationship with her? What is your relationship with her?
I did not have a relationship with her. My understanding of this transaction was that Epstein had asked me if HBRK, which was the entity that I operated out of, would sponsor this individual for her school. This woman was attending school in Switzerland, or I believe it was a finishing and hospitality school, and that Epstein was going to potentially hire her after the school, but he asked if my entity would pay the invoice for her school.
Have you ever met her?
I don't recall ever meeting this woman.
Okay. And beyond what you described, what did you understand Epstein's relationship to be with her?
I did not know Epstein's relationship with her.
And you didn't ask?
I didn't ask. What I was explained to understand was that Epstein was paying for tuition for this woman to attend a hospitality school. And I knew that from previously employing through HBRK individuals that provided hospitality services, where we called them property managers. We kind of overviewed all of the properties. Our entity, HBRK, has hired those individuals before. I thought that that's what this transaction related to.
In the email, Epstein says that you will give out scholarships. What did you understand to mean by that? And
I don't think that's an accurate statement that I personally give out scholarships. The entity,
your business, HBRK.
HBRK, I don't recall, other than this, ever giving out a scholarship. So saying that HBRK or Richard Kahn gives out scholarships is not accurate. What I understood was that HBRK was funded, as I testified earlier. Usually we were funded for 1 year in advance. So for example, if the annual budget for HBRK was $900,000, we would earn $75,000 a month times 12 is $900,000. So Epstein at times thought that HBRK was sitting with unearned revenue. At times, Epstein would ask HBRK to pay an expense out of the unearned revenue, and on occasion, HBRK paid an expense. This, to me, was one example of him looking to pay for education for a woman attending finishing school in Switzerland.
Okay, I want to introduce Exhibit D, which is emails between Mr. Kahn and another redacted individual from September 14th, 2017, with the subject Leon Form. As you can see, Mr. Kahn, this email exchange takes place the day after the one we previously discussed, presumably from the same sender, the same redacted individuals, discusses scholarships, tuition, and visas. And Leon is a university in Switzerland. Have you seen this email before today?
I believe so.
And you know who the sender is?
I believe it's the same woman. Thank you.
Okay. And again, did you have any knowledge or understanding about Steve's relationship with her? Does this jog your memory in terms of their relationship?
I did not know Epstein's relationship with this woman. What I understood at the time was that Epstein wanted to pay for this woman's education. And from my perspective, at the time, this woman was attending a finishing and hospitality school. And it was something that HBRK had hired previously, a property manager to oversee his entities, and nothing with this transaction stood out to me or was alarming or implied sex trafficking.
I'm going to hand over to Mr. Kahn.
I'll give you more time if I don't take it out. Roe Connor, thank you for coming. Is it true that Jane Doe 4, the citation is Doe versus Jeffrey Epstein, 1:19 CV 07675, Southern District of New York, received a financial settlement directly from the estate as her attorney is claiming?
I'm sorry, I don't know who Jane Doe 4 is.
She's the person who has been widely described as alleging that President Trump raped or abused her when she was 13 in the 1980s. And her attorney is out there said that she received a settlement from the estate.
May I just tell him who Jane Doe 4 is, just so it refreshes him?
Okay, I believe I understand who you're referring to. If you don't mind, may you please repeat the question?
Is it true that she received a financial settlement directly from the estate? Her attorney said that she has.
I believe that Jane Doe 4 received a settlement via mediation with the estate, I believe in 2025.
And her attorney saying she received that settlement because she was a victim of Epstein and President Trump. Is that accurate?
I don't recall the mediation statement or the lawsuit in particular, but I don't have recollection of President Trump. I know that she alleges that Epstein abused her, but I don't recall President Trump.
Then I guess it would only be the mediation statement that would be.
I believe she filed a lawsuit, so there was a complaint, which I believe is public. So if I'm not speaking correctly, we can look at the complaint and see if she makes that allegation. But I don't recall from the mediation statement that I don't even actually, now I'm thinking about it, I don't even know if she made a mediation statement. So I don't have any recollection of her making allegations against President Trump.
And do we know why she was ineligible to receive the compensation from the Epstein Victims Compensation Program?
The Epstein Victims Compensation Program, in my view, is a great success. And I'm very happy that that was the first thing I did as co-executor to set up that program. There were 136 claimants that were paid over $121 million. But there were also many individuals that were deemed ineligible for compensation. I believe what you're implying is she was deemed ineligible for compensation. With the Epstein Victims Compensation Program, as co-executors, we wanted to have no involvement. We said that the program could pay out unlimited funds from the estate. There was no limit to any award. Jordy Feldman, who ran the Victims Compensation Program, did not share with us the individuals' packets that they submitted with their allegations against Epstein and or the estate. So I don't know, I never saw the packet. The only information we received as co-executors were the individuals' names and the award that they received, or a list of the individuals that were deemed ineligible.
The last point, then, so I just to get on the record, Jane Doe Goforth did get a settlement. You don't know anything beyond it, but she was given a settlement. Is it there's some people who said, oh, this is all a hoax. The survivors obviously say there are over 1,000 survivors. Given your situation, would you say it's fair to say that there are hundreds of women who were abused or raped or trafficked? And would you say that there are more than Epstein and Maxwell that were involved?
I don't agree with the statement that there are 1,000 plus survivors. My understanding is that the Epstein Victims Compensation Program gave out awards to 136 women. The estate then settled mediation or individually with another 59 individuals, which I believe is 195. I believe, and there's allegations that maybe there's another 50 women out there in my belief. So I'd say the number is probably somewhere in the 250 range, not 1,000.
And what about, would you say it's fair to say that there were other men involved either in trafficking, raping, abusing, participating in the abuse of these girls other than Maxwell and Epstein?
I can't speak for what other men did. I could only speak as co-executor, what I see in the lawsuits against the estate that I'm now tasked with reading and trying to understand. But I can say to you that in some of the settlements that were made, as well as the Epstein Victims Compensation Program, women were allowed to have carve-outs from their release. And there were a number of carve-outs from both the Epstein Victims Compensation Program and the mediation.
What does that mean?
What the carve-out means, when we set up the Epstein Victims Compensation Program, we set up a very broad release. And the thought process as fiduciaries and co-executors was that we did not want to settle with a woman for her to then turn around and sue another employee or someone who was a contractor or affiliated with the estate. So at the time when we were negotiating the release, David Boies was involved in that conversation, and we, at first he was against the broad release, and when the estate and Jordy Feldman and Ken Feinberg all decided that the estate was going to give out larger rewards because the release was a little broader, he agreed to the release. But what I'm saying is that the carve-out would be if this plaintiff's attorney or if this victim was unsure of whether or not this person was covered by the release. They wanted that name to specifically say this release does not cover this individual.
There were other men involved based on that.
I'm not making allegations. Women wanted to have other names carved out. I'm not making any statements that other men were involved. I'm not aware of what went on. Thank you.
We'll end the minority round here. We'll offer.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it here. So pretty much they're just going over like all the payments that were made and the settlements and all that stuff at the court case, civil lawsuits. Anyway, I don't think this guy really knows much other than maybe what Jeffrey Epstein told him. I don't think he was really that involved, but it's almost like Les Wexner acting like he didn't know what was going on. I mean, this guy may just be an actual accountant. Epstein tells him, hey, send me this, send this person that, whatever, payments. And then from there, he doesn't know what's happening with the money. Anyway, I will talk to y'all later. Have a good one. Bye.